my friend.
Cheers. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much.
Let's see. I am excited to have you here. You and I got to know each other pretty well on a recent trip to Spain with the Jorge Ordonez portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really cool, I think, to have... There's a lot of misfits there, right? But I think it was really cool to have kind of like you and Peter Grenoff as like two different generations of the court, right?
Uh-huh.
And it was great to listen to you guys kind of talk a lot and kind of like pick each other's brain. And I thought that was like really, really fascinating because as somebody that took the level 1 many years ago and it expired, and I never really felt a need to do it again because once I'm on the sales side, I don't really need it.
Sure.
It's always nice to kind of like see the I don't know, the system, the blood flowing a little bit more. So I know that now you're at Spruce, which is I mean, certainly a San Francisco staple if there is one.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of know you were working at ASA before that. But why don't you take us back to the olden days, back to the beginning?
Okay.
You know, where are you from? How'd wine come into your life? And yeah.
Absolutely. So I'm from the Russian River Valley of Sonoma County. I'm from Santa Rosa, born and raised. And it kind of was like I'm not a nepotism baby, but my mom is a graphic designer.
Cool.
And she designs wine labels. As
Sick.
like that's kind of the niche that she fell into, going to a like fine arts design school here in California, and like also her growing up in the Bay Area. And so like I guess I just kind of knew that like the wine industry was a career path available option.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, my first job ever was at Old Navy, but my second job ever was at a winery.
Wow.
So like my ex-girlfriend's mom was like the accountant at a winery, and I got a job doing like seasonal like manual labor basically. And like packing up the wine club shipments, and you know, like once a month I would come in for like 2 or 3 days and tape together boxes and send out the wines, and the hourly rate was much better than, you know, working Old Navy. So I was like, okay, this is great. Yeah. Like I'm happy to do this. And I guess at some point along the way, it became like oh, you know, this is actually kind of a cool job. Like instead of just packing up the wine club shipments once a month, I can be like, I can polish glassware. I can be the dishwasher. You know, I can be the busser. I can kind of do whatever I want.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like they are very happy to pay, you know, an 18, 19-year-old minimum wage to, you know, do all these things at the winery, you know. And so like I guess the like real turning point was like, you know, I was working at, it's called Michel Schlumberger. It's in Dry Creek Valley. You know, they focus on French wine. They have like many, many different grape varieties planted, but also the big thing is that they're a like wine estate. So they have like, you know, 40 or whatever acres of vineyards in their backyard. And one of my mentors, you know, one of the like managers there basically was like, oh, do you want to come on this like tour that we're giving to some of the guests in the tasting room? And I was like, yeah, of course, why not, right? So I like sat on the back of the golf cart while, you know, he's giving people the tour of this like wine estate, and he's telling them about how the leaves on the Pinot Noir vines are different than the leaves on the Cabernet Franc vines, and how there probably shouldn't be Pinot Noir in Dry Creek Valley in the first place, you know, but there is. And like all this different kind of stuff. And at the time I wanted to be a teacher, and I was going to Santa Rosa Junior College for like education classes and stuff like that. And I was kind of like, oh, like this is really cool. Like, you know, they're like the office here is the vineyards.
Right.
And like there's a lake on the
Could
property.
be outside.
And the vineyard manager's family like lives on the property.
Yeah.
And like it just kind of started like snowballing from there. Like I got to like, before I was even 21, like I wasn't able to legally pour wine in the tasting room. And so like what they would have me do is like, I started being the guy like driving the golf cart out in the vineyards and like taking people on these tours and being like, hey, like you see this like this bulge at the bottom of the trunk of the grapevine, like that's where the rootstock is grafted onto the American roots. And you know, it's like, and these people from like the Midwest and the East Coast and be like, well, how do you know all of this? You know? And it's like, well, I just kind of hang out here at the winery and like they tell me these things, you know? And it's like, I guess like I kind of started to just kind of pick it up, and it's just fun. And like, you know, some of the people that worked at the property had been working there for like multiple generations. And like one of the guys that like, he came to work in the tasting room, and he like previously had been working in the cellar, and his mom lived on the property, and like his family was like part of the people that managed the vineyards and everything. And like I went to like his home like on the property like after work one day, and like they like cooked for me and like gave me a little bit of like the moonshine that they made on the property. And I'm just like, this is like a very much like a family, you know, industry. And it's like people that like work here at this vineyard. It's like, whether it be like the people in the tasting room or the people in the cellars or the people in the vineyards, like there's kind of this like idea that like everyone's in this together, you know? So it was kind of just like, oh, like I could see myself doing this. Yeah. And I worked there for, you know, 4 or 5 years or whatever it was. Wow. And eventually I was 21 and I could pour wine in the tasting room and all that stuff. But yeah, that was kind of like that was my first like real job that I was at for a good amount of time. And, you know, I learned a lot and I met a lot of people, and it really, I guess, it influenced me from like wanting to be a teacher to like, still at this point, I'm like in education.
You're educating.
I am educating, you know, but I'm more like educating adults rather than children now. But yeah, it was kind of like, it just kind of opened my eyes to like a new kind of like world and opportunity, basically. So yeah, that was kind of like, that's kind of how I got into wine. I love that. That's the origin story.
That's and when you were able to work in the tasting room, did you just start working in the tasting room full time, or were you still kind of like a Swiss Army knife? You could kind of do anything and do all the things.
At one point I was and we had like at the winery we had a private chef, and we did a lot of like, you know, like wine club dinners and stuff like that. So there was definitely a point where I was the dishwasher. And like, you know, the chef and the sous chef would like call me names and like be like, oh, you're the highest paid dishwasher in Sonoma County. And, you know, that I was happy with that. And I think like at some point I kind of transitioned into like, you know, enough people kind of like stopped working at the winery. It's like, you know, the hospitality director leaves. And then like the tasting room manager leaves. And then it's like, okay, suddenly I'm 20 years old, but I'm also the most tenured staff person because I've been working here for over 2 years, you know, and that's kind of weird. So I remember it's like the first like real like promotion interview I ever did in my life. But like I basically was like, hey, I want to be the assistant tasting room manager. And I was 20 years old. Yeah. And so, you know, I went in to meet with the CEO, and I like I had like went into our like POS system, and I like pulled all the numbers and like printed it out and was like, hey, like when like my sales averages are higher than everyone else's, and like when, you know, when I'm here on premise, we sell X amount of dollars more than we do than when I'm not here.
Awesome.
And I was kind of just like, and he's just like, he was probably like 60, but in my mind he was like 80.
Yeah.
He was this old guy and like, like veteran, like old school kind of guy. And I was just this young kid. And like, my voice was probably like 3 octaves higher. And like, I came in and I like showed him all this data. And I was like, here's why I should be your assistant manager.
Yeah.
And he was like, at the end, he was kind of like, well, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
It's you. And he's like, as soon as I saw all the materials that you brought, like I was going to give it to you anyway.
That's so funny.
And I'm like, well,
he's like, I just wanted you to present it.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess that's cool. I guess that's good. But so I was like, to answer your question, yeah, I like went at that point, I was like in the tasting room full time. And that's kind of like what I was doing. And I was 20 years old and I legally wasn't allowed to pour wine. So I was in this like, like low level managerial position, managing people that were older than me.
Right.
That
could legally pour
wine. So I'd have to be like, hey, like I need you to go like take care of this tasting in the back room, like blah, blah, blah. I need you to pour these people. They're on this wine, blah, blah, blah. And like, I'd have these people, whether it'd be like they were 25 or 30 or 60, they'd all be like looking at me and kind of rolling their eyes sometimes. And, I had people that I still consider my friends, but like that I was working with at the time that I happened to come into like a supervisor position. And I'd be like, hey, like, when we close at 5:00 and a guest comes in at like 4:50 and wants a tasting and they're all bitching and moaning about it. And I'm like, hey guys, I need you to do it. And they're like being like, we know so much more than you, like blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, hey, I don't know what to say, but
that's so funny.
I guess I'm the boss, and I don't think we should turn people away,
Policy is policy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's like, once I was in the tasting room, I was kind of in the tasting room, and we had a big party when I turned 21, and then I started pouring wine for people. And I still have some regulars from, that job that like I've seen at, future jobs since, and I've seen at like totally like separate work events for like, my wife here in the city. And it's like, there's all, once you get to know those people, like in one facet, it's like you run into them in the future. And it's like, it's always like, the connections are good, for life basically. But yeah, that's once I was in the tasting room, I was in the tasting room.
I love that. And that was kind of also your foot in the door into service industry in a way, right? Because if you're helping drop food and bussing tables and doing all those things. So when you left the winery, did you immediately go into the hospitality industry? And
kind of. Okay. So I worked at 3 wineries before I hopped into the restaurant world.
Okay.
I worked at, Michel Schlumberger Wine Estate. And then I left there in like mid 2018. And then I went to Sunsei Winery. Which is a great little family winery in Russian River Valley. They make like 40 different wines and they do a really good job. But I was kind of just looking for like that was kind of when I was like thinking about doing my Court of Master Sommelier certifications. Great. So I did my intro when I was at Michel Schlumberger and I had like learned about it and I was like, oh, like this is a cool thing. Like I went on Netflix, I watched, the Somm documentary like everyone does. And I was like, okay, I could do this. This is cool. And like, at the time I was a young kid and I thought I knew everything about wine. And like, sometimes I remember this, like I remember saying to a guest that I was giving like a wine tour to, and we were in the barrel room and I was like tasting them on some like samples of, Syrah and Cabernet from the barrels. And like, they were like, oh, wow, like, you're so young, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, yeah, blah, blah, blah. And they were like, there's probably not very many, like, people your age, like, in the wine industry. And I remember, this is just, like, kind of embarrassing, but I remember this vividly, like, telling them, being like, yeah, I probably know, like, 95% more than anyone else about wine as like a 21-year-old, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, I get, maybe that was true if you like think of every single person in the world, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, I think about how much I know now, which is like still not enough, but I know so much more than I did when I was a kid. And it's just, it's so funny being like, oh yeah, I know what RS is. I know what TA is, I know what rootstock means. Like, like I can go out in a vineyard and I can show you like the differences in the leaves. I know that Cabernet Sauvignon is a cross between Cabernet Franc and Sauvignon Blanc. Like, I know it all.
Yeah.
And it's like, then I kind of found out the like CMS like level 1 thing, and I took that and I was like, okay, like that was fun. That was like a lot of stuff that I like think I knew, and like a lot of new stuff. And obviously it's just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah. Certainly the tip of the iceberg.
And so the next, when I worked at the next winery, Student Say, it was kind of just like I wanted a really chill job. I wanted to study. I wanted to read, Kevin Zraely's Windows on the World that I see over there. That was the first wine book I ever read.
Great book.
There was a sommelier named Marnie Old who came to do some like wine and food seminars at Michel Schlumberger, and she was a big influence in my career. And she has a book, and I called Wine, a Tasting Course, like a class in every glass. And it's actually my favorite book to recommend to people getting into wine, because it just breaks it down in such an intuitive way. So like, I remember like reading that and like being like, oh, like, okay, like Chardonnay and Sauvignon Blanc, like there's a lot of differences here. Like, but being able to describe that in a more nuanced way than just like working in a tasting room, being like, this one's round and this one's crisp, kind of thing. Like, oh, there's different, like, there's different compounds.
There's other character. Well,
like that's a little bit next level, right? But it's like, there's like thiols and malolactic fermentation. It's like, okay. It starts to get a little bit
all
more.
of a sudden it's chemistry.
Right. It's like, okay, it's chemistry. Right. Yeah. Exactly. And so I just wanted a place where it was chill, and I knew the owners and they're great and they know a lot about business, and they kind of helped me have like a good environment to like learn and kind of be happy, and which is a big thing. And I took my CMS Quartermaster Sommelier certified exam when I was 22, and I barely passed by the skin of my teeth, because I never worked in a restaurant. And the
service side is a little different.
The service part kind of it rolled me a little bit, but I passed just barely. And then I was like, all right, cool. Like, let me go work at like a fun, famous winery. So I went to work at William Sellium.
Oh yeah.
And that was really fun. Great job. Great job. And some of my favorite Pinots in California. And then eventually after that is when I moved to Palo Alto and was like, oh, I could work in a restaurant. Yeah. Like, that's probably pretty easy.
especially if you wanted to round out that service side of things, and you wanted to push that knowledge. Yeah.
Exactly. It was very much a like, I remember coming in on my for an interview, and I brought a bottle of William Sellium Pinot to the wine director, basically, who was interviewing me. And I was like, hey, I brought this as a gift for you, and to butter him up, you know? And he kind of
That's great. That's a good idea.
Totally. And he's like, and it was like the like special bottling,
right?
Which like seems fancier than it is.
Yeah,
it's just the employee wine that they use that like isn't good enough to make the like Sonoma Coast or Russian River Valley or whatever.
Yeah.
But that's probably what got me the job.
That's great.
And then like I remember like one of my first days, the GM is like, are you the guy that has like country club experience or sommelier experience? And I was like, both. And like looking back on it now, it's like I did not have sommelier experience. I had passed my certified sommelier, but I did not have certified. I did not have
no
sommelier
floor hours.
No.
Yeah.
So that was kind of my foray into, I guess, restaurant hospitality.
Right.
I did like about 5 years of winery hospitality, and then I'm currently at about 5 years of restaurant hospitality.
That's great.
Yeah.
And you're now advanced.
Yes.
And how was the process from certified to advanced for you? I mean, was that months and months of preparation, lots of stress? Did you have to, shift your work schedule a little bit to kind of like take a step back to move forward, or?
Yeah. I mean, when I passed certified, like I said, I was 22 and I was very much like I barely passed and I had spent a lot of time preparing for it and I kind of just wanted to chill out. And I like had, I passed in May of 2019 and no, I passed in October of 2018. And then I moved and started my new restaurant job in like August of 2019. So like less than a year had passed and I was kind of just like, I'm going to focus on like my new job and like learning how to be a server in a restaurant.
Sure.
Which apparently is hard. I didn't know at the time, but
it's harder
it was
than you
hard.
think.
Yeah, it's harder than you think. And like I'm just gonna like kind of chill out for a bit.
Yeah.
And I wasn't really studying. I would like, read a wine book every now and then because like I like wine.
Yep.
And I would, chat wine with people at the restaurant and my bosses and, et cetera, et cetera. But it wasn't, I took like what I passed and certified in 2018. And then I really didn't start studying again until 2021.
Yeah.
So like, I guess 3 years.
Well, the pandemic years are so wonky too. You know what I mean?
It's a good point.
Yeah.
I was smoking a lot of weed, playing a lot of video games.
Yeah.
I was kind of just like,
weren't we all?
Right. I don't know how I feel about this whole like killing myself on the career thing. Like, I kind of want to just enjoy myself.
Yeah.
So yeah, at some point about 3 years after, I was like, okay, let me start a tasting group. One of my friends, Talia, we met on like Guild Somm, the like discussion boards. We formed a tasting group with a couple other people and we started doing just like a weekly tasting group. And then like, it was like, all right, let's take let's go for advanced. Like, let's take that like that placement test, and it's like, okay, we both like passed. Like, so we can go to the course now.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, let's go to the course. And then like right before we were going to the course, like I took my then girlfriend, now wife, out on a Valentine date to Spruce. And we were looking for Michelin star restaurants to go in San Francisco. And we did not live in San Francisco at the time. And we were looking at a list of like Michelin star restaurants in San Francisco. And like we found one, and there were a lot of places that were like 1 week before Valentine's Day had no availability for Valentine's Day. Go figure,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
And so we found one that had availability, and it was Spruce somehow, because we definitely don't usually have availability.
That's what I was thinking.
So we must have gotten like a cancellation, and like we kind of like slid right into that spot. But I remember thinking like, oh, this is such a nice restaurant. Like, why is it so far down the list? And it was alphabetical. Right. I didn't realize it at the time, but
That's funny.
And then like I do some research and I like look up their wine list and I'm like, oh, this is cool. They have like
fucking absurd. Yeah.
Like not only is the wine list 100 pages, but like just on BTG, they have like Ravenel Petit Chablis and Dagenau Silex.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, these are wines I've read about. And I haven't ever seen them in the wild. And they have them by the glass. Like, that's pretty cool.
Pretty rad.
So like we go to Spruce for Valentine's Day. And I I'm wearing like my Air Force Ones and like light blue jeans
Yeah,
and like
yeah.
I think I was wearing like a light pink linen shirt.
Yeah.
You know, I'm underdressed, but
Eh,
that's okay.
it's Valentine's Day.
And like I remember just like we're sitting like kind of right at the back of the restaurant, like right next to the sommelier station. And I remember like towards the end of the meal, like getting up and like walking over to the sommelier station. And I'm like, hey, like, are you guys the somms here? And they were probably like, it's gotta be like 8:30, 9 p.m. Like they're tired.
Yeah, yeah.
They're getting into the third turn.
Go away.
Like
Yeah.
they're they've poured so many pairings. They're finally about at
Right.
like the clutch, like almost way home. And there's this like goofy kid
Yeah,
like
yeah.
walking up being like, hey, do you guys work here? Like the wine here is pretty good. And like it's my friends, Caleb and Albert. And they're all like, yeah, we're the somms here. Like, hey, nice to meet you. Go back to your seat
Right.
now, right?
Please go sit back down, sir.
And
Your next course is coming.
right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. And I had mentioned that I was like attending the
Mhm.
Advanced Sommelier course
Mhm.
in Dallas, and my friend Albert was like, oh, this guy Caleb is gonna be there too. Like, you guys should room together.
Yeah.
And I heard after the fact that Caleb was like, dude, don't tell him that he should room with me. That's a stranger. Like, what are you doing?
Right,
And
yeah.
like, of course, and so that was my in, basically. It was
right.
like walking up to these random people at this restaurant that I had found on Google. I knew nothing about. And I was just like, I just walked up like during the middle of service and I was like, hey, you guys work here? I might want to work here. And they're like,
Trying to
yeah,
swing the
buddy.
hit.
All right.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
wearing your light blue jeans.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, I can see your angles. Like,
Okay, pink linen. Go
yeah,
back to the
exactly.
table.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it ended up, somehow it worked out. But that was kind of my like, okay, I should get that guy's number. Like,
Mhm.
and then the Advanced Sommelier course went around and we did hang out there. And and I when we came back from it, I DM'd the Spruce's corporate beverage director, Jamie, on Instagram. And I was like, hey, by the way, like I just got back from the Advanced Sommelier course with, my friend Caleb. And I ate at Spruce this year and I enjoyed some of the Dagenau and the Ravenau by the glass.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
it's a pretty cool restaurant, And then so he immediately messages me back and he's like, oh, like, so you're working at ASA, restaurant Los Altos, like, how's it going over there, basically,
Yeah.
And so like then, the next week or so, I'm working at ASA and it's probably like 6 o'clock or so. I walk out of the kitchen. I look to my right and I see a tall table and I see a Code 38 sitting on the table.
Mhm.
And I'm like, oh, that's a nice wine key.
Yeah. For listeners, it's like a $300, $400 wine
at
key.
least.
Yeah. For
like that's like the cheap
affordable
used
ones.
secondhand,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
like if you want to buy like a new one and it's like the high end model, it's like $1,200 or something like that. So
Incredible
it catches my eye.
Yeah.
And so I like look up and I'm like, oh, like, and I look at the guy and I'm like, hey, that's a nice wine key. And he's like, oh yeah, thanks. Like, he's like, you're Jordan Hobro. And I'm like, oh, you're Jamie Pineda. Like, okay. And like, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. And he's like, yeah, like I heard you just were back from this advanced somm course and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, so this is what's happening right now.
Yep. Great.
And I'm like, okay, cool. Like, I was like, it's nice to meet you. Like, I had a great time with Caleb at Spruce and blah. And he's like, hey, you should maybe consider working for our company,
That's
And it's
great.
like, and it's like, yeah. Like when I moved to San Francisco, let's do it.
Yeah.
And so eventually I moved to San Francisco
Mhm.
and I interview at Spruce and I'm kind of just like, hey, like Jamie's like, he sets up a stage for me. I
Mhm.
come and stage. Like I come in a suit, I stage with the sommelier team, and then like I come in for an interview afterwards and I'm like, hey, like I kind of just want like flexibility. Like I can start as a lunch captain, and they're
Right.
like, yeah, sure.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
just come
Whatever.
work for
Yeah,
us.
yeah.
So it's like, so that was honestly a big part of
That's great.
passing to
Right.
finally circle back to what you actually asked me
No, it's fine.
was like, passing the advanced exam, did that affect your work schedule at all? And it's like, yeah, I had the fortune of like switching jobs and coming into a position of working at like a fine dining restaurant that has many like high level sommeliers
A
that
lot
work
of
at,
incredible mentors there. Yeah.
like currently we have like 2 master sommeliers and like 7 advanced sommeliers that
Yeah.
work for the company or
Yeah.
something like that. So I like came to work at the company and I'm like, yeah, I kind of just want flexibility. I kind of want to just like, I'll work lunches, I'll work dinners, but like I kind of just want to be a server,
That's sick.
and
Yeah.
it's like because I had the wine background, I was kind of able to, I don't want to say unfairly, but like, befriend the sommeliers
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
a little bit more than certain other servers would be able to
Sure.
do. And it was kind of just like I'm like, hey, like, I decided to, full send, like study for the advanced exam. And so it was like me and a couple of the other sommeliers were studying for the advanced exam. And so like I would come into work every day and like we would all grill each other on theory questions and like, but I think the real like big part of like adjusting my schedule and like the kind of like quote unquote unfair advantage that I had was like because my bosses were like also my friends and like in a way they weren't my peers in like this at work, they were my supervisors, but like in the world of wine they were kind of my peers. And I could text them and be like, hey, like,
Yeah.
if you're gonna cut anybody, you should cut me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so like there were a lot of days where like as like an hourly employee, as like just being like a server at a restaurant, it's like I think that's what allowed me to pass
Yeah.
advance.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because like
Much more flexible schedule.
totally flexible
Yeah.
schedule. Like
Yeah.
currently I'm a salaried employee,
Yeah. Great.
as a sommelier at
Mhm.
Spruce. And like, I work a lot more hours and I get a lot more like on the floor experience. But like when I was a server, like I would just like kind of come in, clock in, clock out. Like I would come in at like 3:30 instead of 1 o'clock.
Mhm.
It's like I just kind of like it's just a ton of time to study.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like I think that's probably the biggest advantage that anyone that is wanting to jump from certified to advanced can have is like, and even also from advanced to master, is like having a flexible job.
Flexibility. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like I remember talking to Rebecca Feynman,
Mhm.
who's a master sommelier
Mhm.
here in San Francisco, proprietor of, Ungrafted and
Mhm.
Glue Glue.
Mhm.
And, she was telling me that, her husband Chris used to work at Spruce as a sommelier.
Mhm.
And she
Who's also now an MS.
who's also now a master sommelier. And she was saying that she used to just be a server across the street at
Sociale?
at Sociale.
Oh yeah. I didn't
And
know that.
yeah. And so she was saying, she's like, yeah, when I was studying for MS, like I just was waiting tables at Sociale. She's like, I'd go in at, 4 o'clock and make, however much money and get off work and keep studying. And she's like, I didn't have to be a manager to anybody.
Mhm.
I didn't have to like come in on off days. Like I didn't have to come in early. Like I was getting paid for every hour that I was there. Like she's like, it was like kind of a low expectation job.
Right.
And like and a lot of people, I guess, who are master sommeliers will tell you that like if you're studying for the master sommelier exam, that's kind of, it maybe has to be the highest priority,
Sure.
in your
Yeah.
life. And like having a job like that allows you to place the highest priority on
Yeah. Yeah.
on the MS exam.
Yeah, it's crazy to see, like, there's some people that I know that are like running their own program, have a partner that is like, I'd say they haven't been with forever, right? So you can't just like ghost them and sit in the office for hours at a time and,
Mhm.
study and ignore your partner. The relationship still needs tending and trying to study for something even like an advance. And just to see the level of stress that's taking place with that is just like, already a lot. So yeah, I can't imagine.
Advanced wasn't that hard, but that's because I had a job
Right.
that allowed me to study all
Yeah,
the
yeah,
time.
yeah.
Like I could just like there's so many resources out there, like Guildsom
Mhm.
has study guides, and like there's so many books out there, and like Jancis Robinson, and like there's just a ton. And it's ultimately like it was totally hard. Like I don't want to diminish that, especially because I know there are people who like put so much time and effort
Yep.
into it. But like if you have unlimited time, if time is not like a constrained
Yeah.
resource, then
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, you don't have to know everything,
Yeah.
you know? It's
Well, you
like,
had your mise en place, right? You had enough time to like prep everything,
yeah,
take your time, study versus just like rushing into service and like not having any side work done kind of thing.
totally.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, the Master Sommelier exam is like obviously extremely hard. And, you know, only a handful of people pass the theory exam every year.
Mhm.
But like the advanced exam is like, you know, like dozens of people pass that every year.
Mhm.
And that's like passing all three portions concurrently,
Right.
you know? So it's like, it's definitely doable.
Yeah.
It definitely takes a lot of time
Mhm.
and like effort, but like, I think anyone can do it if they have the time,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
That's like, I didn't have a kid. I didn't
Yeah.
have a second job. I was getting cut
Yeah.
once or twice a week,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and I could afford to do that.
Yeah.
And like, you know, a lot of people like, you know, you need to pick up the extra shifts to
Yeah.
afford rent and
Yeah.
everything. And it's like, I think I was just
Especially here in the Bay Area.
especially here in San Francisco,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah.
it's like, I think I was just kind of like at like a sweet spot where like I had time as a plentiful resource.
That's great.
And like, it paid off, you know?
Mm.
And I did very much have to, you know, I told you earlier tonight, you know, before we hopped on here, that I was at Standard Deviant.
Right.
And like, I remember many nights, like a couple years ago when I was studying for advanced, like there was at least a couple times where we went to Standard Deviant with our friends, and like other people were like drinking and playing board games. And I was like, literally, I had my 6 different colored highlighters
Yeah,
out,
yeah.
and I was like on my own study guide,
That's
being
so
all
funny.
like, all right,
Ugh.
okay, so there's how many different AOPs in the Southern Rhone
Right,
Valley,
right.
and like, so like, which is Gigon Dost red only,
Right.
and like, you know, that kind of thing.
Oh.
And like, you know, trying to learn the different, you know, the 13 to 18 different grapes of Chateauneuf de Pape, and
Yep.
like, you know, there's an infinite amount of knowledge to learn, but like,
And it changes every year. You know?
yeah, you know,
Yeah.
and some of it does change
Yeah,
every
yeah.
single year, but I think the overall, the most broad kind of answer to your question that I can give is that like, if you have time,
Right.
which maybe most people don't,
Right.
I feel like I don't have that right now.
Not anymore. Yeah.
But at that time I did.
Yeah.
And it's totally doable with
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's totally doable with time. Time is the most valuable resource.
Time is the most valuable resource. One of our old VP at the company that I work at now at Chambers once said, the most valuable resource we have is the attention of our salespeople. And I was like, damn, for a company that sells Vogue and Leflevre and Dujac, say like the most valuable resource we have is our salespeople's time. I was like, I feel really appreciated right now.
Because that stuff sells itself.
Yeah, yeah. But also it was like, it was cool because, you know, it shows that like, yeah, I mean, if you're able to put something on our radar and there's, you know, 40 of us or 50 of us in the state, like it makes things a little bit more doable. But yeah, the time in front of us and the efficiency of that time is so important because there's a lot less time for us kind of on a normal basis, right? One of the things I wanted to ask you, and this is more maybe a personal question, I guess, is who taught you how to interview? Because you're talking about a couple different things that you've done right now that I think are like very outside the box, right? You know, prepared a lot to ask for promotion. You pulled sales reports and you were able to kind of see these things at a young age. you walked up to the somms at Spruce and kind of like engaged in conversation. You brought a bottle of Cellium, like a wine that they can't buy, right? Effectively from
Mhm.
Cellium to an interview. Like, where did you just kind of come up with these things off the cuff, or?
It's just, I mean, though, nobody taught me,
Right.
but like, I don't even think I'm particularly good at interviewing, but I mean, I guess, uh, treat people the way you want to be treated,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like that,
That's great.
like the golden rule.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, if I'm interviewing somebody and they bring me a bottle of wine, I would like that.
It's pretty cool.
If
Yeah.
if I guess I'm kind of just like, I've always been like, what's gonna get me the highest, chance of success?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I don't necessarily think like I didn't like go to school to like learn how to interview or
Yeah.
anything
Yeah.
like that. But I guess it's just kind of like, it's just kind of like I try and just be very much like, just live my life on like good vibes.
Sure.
And I try and think about what other people would like, to see or hear or feel from me
Yeah.
whenever I interact with them.
That's awesome.
And like, I don't try and think too hard about things.
Right.
Like I don't think about like, oh, like for the examples that you just brought up, like, pulling out like the data for one of my like first interviews or bringing a bottle of wine, I don't think about like, it's like, oh, but maybe would they think that this is being too try hard, or like, is this gonna paint me in a light that like makes it seem like I'm just like jockeying for a position, like not because of my own skill, but rather because of like what like material gifts I'm bringing, or
Right.
blah 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 blah. I'm kind of just like, would this be nice? Yeah, sure, fuck it,
Yeah.
like let's just do it.
That's awesome. I love that. That's so cool. I mean, again, it's something really interesting when you were mentioning that. It's like, I think, as somebody that has done lots of different interviews throughout my life, and my mom would kind of mentor me on interviews when I was a kid. It was very much like about the interview process itself.
Mhm.
And I feel like even now when I reach out to people on Instagram for the podcast, sometimes I just like DM people, like, fucking whatever, like,
Yeah.
worst case scenario, they're gonna ignore it. You know what I
Exactly.
mean? But like, you got to swing the hit, right? Anyways, we'll bounce into another tangent. Do you remember what Jamie drank when he came to see you at ASA?
I don't think he was drinking anything.
No?
I think it was just like, he got off of work and he's like, let me do a quick, like,
I love that.
try and steal this person away
That's
from
great.
their company.
Getting called up to the big leagues, though.
Like, I know he likes to, I mean, he likes a gin martini.
Yeah.
He likes green chartreuse
You
neat.
got to spill.
Yeah, thank you. Wow, that's crazy.
Gin martini, chartreuse.
And yeah, he likes a gin martini. He likes green chartreuse. And other than that, I actually don't really know like what wine he likes. Like, I mean, wine that I've drinking with him recently is like we drank a 2020 Domaine Leflaive Pucelle together recently.
Cool. Sick.
It was delicious.
Yeah.
Neither of us paid for it.
Right. That's when it tastes the best.
Right,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And we drank a 2000 vintage Chateau Pichon Baron recently. And again, which we didn't pay for.
Right.
Which one of our best regulars in the world came in and was like, hey, what should we drink tonight? You meaning me and Jamie, he's like, you guys should sit down with us, like, you should have some wine. So it's like, that makes it worth it. But and those, so I know he likes Old Bordeaux, I know he likes white Burgundy, but that's not really like who does like those things,
Yeah.
It's like sommeliers like if somebody tells you that they like champagne and Riesling and white Burgundy, it's like
Yeah.
no new information has been
Exactly.
gained.
Yeah.
So I don't remember what he was drinking. If he was drinking, he was probably drinking a gin martini,
That's
if
so
anything.
funny. Yeah.
But yeah, he just was like, he's like, I've got a little bit of time to kill. Like, I just got off of work. Like, he was probably at Selby's or whatever it
Selby's is
was.
what I was thinking, yeah.
And like, he's like, let me drive over to Los Altos and like pull out my Code 38 onto the table.
Of course,
and
yeah.
just like see how long it takes for him to notice me. And I've brought this up to him too.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm like, Jamie, like, like when you poach me, like, is that a move? And he's like, oh yeah, it's a move.
That's
like,
so funny.
He's like, you go to the restaurant. He's like, you pull your Code 38, you put it out on the table, and he's like, you just see like who notices it.
That's so funny.
He's like, it's kind of like catnip to sommeliers.
Right.
Yeah. If they recognize what it is, then they know their stuff a little
That's so
bit.
funny. Yeah.
So I thought that was hilarious, but it worked on me clearly because I work for him now.
Yeah,
but
that's awesome. One of my favorite stories, and it made her laugh so hard, is Kayla Pope, who's been on the podcast before. She's the GM at Angler right now, but we were working together at Ozumo, and we were sitting there and we were like talking about something, and I said something about an Osso, and she's like, "Do you own a Duran?" I was like, "I drive a Ford Focus. Like, of course I don't own a fucking Duran, and much less a Code 38. I definitely wouldn't own that." But yeah, that's awesome. It's like a nice watch for people that are into watches.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Like, ooh, what's that? Yeah.
I have the Wanky that I have is like a Chateau Laguiole. I don't know how to pronounce it. It's spelled Laguiole, but I don't think it's pronounced that way. And it's like a nice Wanky. My wife got it for me. I think it's like $200. It's like a Christmas present. They accidentally sent us 2, so that made it worth it. And then they sent us a letter being like, "Hey, it looks like you got an extra one," which I threw in the trash, obviously.
Yeah.
Because we're keeping that extra one,
of course.
But like, that's a nice wine key, and I kind of had the hype phase of being like, I want a Code 38 for a little bit, but I really like this one. And but I think it's like it doesn't have to be an expensive wine key, but the point is that like it's a tool that, like, at least for me, and I imagine for you too, based on how many bottles I see with the foils cut,
we open a lot of wine,
is that you have one wine key that you like to use, and you probably use more than every other wine key, and that kind of is like, it's a tool, for you. It's like it's your cell phone in your pocket, your wallet and your pair of keys. It's like your watch that you put on your wrist. It's like it's a part of you. It's your mise en place, right?
100%.
And it's like, so like I have my wine key that I use, and every time I use a different wine key, I'm like, okay, yeah, I notice how this is different. But every time I pull out my wine key, I'm like, oh yeah, this is the smooth, this is the good. And I think a lot of people, it's like they have their Code 38, they love it. They paid $10,000 for it. So it's like they have to love it, right? And it doesn't, I think it's more about like, it doesn't have to be a Code 38, but like it has to be one that and you love and you feel confident about making a clean cut with.
Yeah. And I think kind of the other thing is once you get to wine keys of that level, there's like replacement parts and stuff like that too. I'll wear down the serrations on some wine keys after like a year. They just don't cut anymore. It just doesn't cut the same. And I'm kind of just like, all right, I guess it's done. Or the knife will get stuck or the corkscrew will get bent. And you're just kind of like, time to toss it and get a new one, But get a nice one. It makes a big difference.
I know. I don't like the serrated though.
No?
Like the little mini serrations. I like.
Let's see.
But like all those truthers will tell you that the Code 38 knife isn't serrated.
Right. Yeah.
And like, let me see what you have.
This is just the Ramey wine key. I love it. I love the hook on the blade, and then
this is nice. So this is
the spring double knuckle is also I like that.
I kind of like these ones that have like the little mini serrations, but it's like still pretty clean of a cut.
Yeah, because otherwise you just rip the foil half the time.
Because otherwise it just literally rips the foil.
Yeah.
But I will say that I prefer a single hinge.
Oh yeah, really? Wow.
Yeah. Like I used to have one of these, and like it can be nice for like older corks and stuff like that, but like pulling it halfway up and then readjusting and doing it, it's just too much time.
Yeah.
Like I like, when I'm like popping bottles at Spruce, like every second counts, so I really like, twist, 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 and then you just the single motion
One rip.
pop,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's it.
That's awesome. I love that. Yeah. It's crazy to work on the floor with certain people. Like when I'd work on the floor with John at Boulevard, he'd show the person the bottle and like fucking 5 seconds later, the cork's out of the bottle. And I'm just like, how? It's magic, right? But when you have decades of experience doing that table side, like you really learn how to shave off like a half second here and there. And I mean, it's so cool.
Some restaurants said this, but every second counts.
Every second counts. One of them. Some restaurant nobody's ever heard of, but what's on the horizon? Are you well, I guess I have this question. You were mentioning classes earlier and you were mentioning placement exams.
Mhm.
These classes and things are these relatively new? Because when I took my intro, which was, I mean, it was like 2016, it was just like that. And then you would take certified and then you would take advanced, but there wasn't really like a lot of other classes.
Totally. So I think like what's happened is that like I honestly think that the Netflix documentary has played a huge part of it
Great.
because like it's become such a more popular thing than it used to be.
Yeah.
Certified didn't even used to exist.
Right.
It used to just be intro, advanced, MS.
Yeah.
And like then certified came about, and then like 2011 or 12, like the Netflix movie Somm came out, and like everyone was like, oh, like I want to be a master sommelier. I want to be a master sommelier.
Mhm.
I was one of them.
Yeah.
And like I think there's all like it's hard to administer the advanced sommelier exam. It's expensive. Only MSs can do it.
Right.
Like, it's like you're doing like high level things, you're pouring high level wines, and like I mean my understanding of it basically is that like a lot of people pass certified, but the jump to advanced is pretty large.
Right.
And so like they kind of bottleneck it a
Sure.
little bit.
Yeah.
So it's like, you have to take like a placement exam to get into the advanced sommelier course.
Mhm.
And then after you take the course, the year after that, you can take the exam. So they basically make you wait a year
Yeah.
from certified to advanced, just to give you adequate time to prepare.
It's great.
And the placement test is kind of like an extra step, and it does seem kind of unnecessary. I mean, they let in like, it's like the top 80 percentile get in,
Mhm.
So it's like, I think it's just a matter of like, I think the course is a good thing.
Yeah.
Because the difference in certified to advanced is quite high.
Yeah.
And also like the course is like, it kind of, it re-injects joy into the process.
Sure.
Because like this is a fun thing.
Yeah.
Like
Should be.
at the end of the day,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
this is something that we choose to do.
Mhm.
It's not something that we have to do. So it's like this is like the advanced sommelier course that I went to as like a young bright-eyed certified sommelier. It's like I met people there that are still some of my closest friends.
Mhm.
And it's like, and we went out to dinner and we ordered crazy wines that I didn't know anything about. And now I do. And, it's like, we got to hear master sommeliers tell us about how they deductively blind taste wines. And it's like, shit, man, like the light bulb kind of went off. And it's like, oh, it's like, there's an actual method to the madness of like blind tasting.
Yeah.
And it's like, just being in like that room with like, 200 people, like all of them feeling so like, passionate and like hungry and like wanting to like advance their career and everything. It like, it just like, it makes you, like I said, it re-injects joy.
Mhm.
It's kind of like, oh, this is fun.
Yeah.
Like this is a cool thing that we're
Yeah.
doing.
I love
Like all of these people want the same thing. And honestly, like this is going to sound like kind of douchey, but like I remember at the advanced course, they were kind of like, only like statistically speaking, like only like there was like what, like 200 people in the room or something like that. and they're like, statistically, like less than 10 of you will become like master sommeliers
Wow.
or whatever like that.
Yeah.
And I remember like looking around and being like, yeah, I could be one of the 10.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
it's like, and that's still a long ways away.
You have to have that. You have to have that confidence though, because if you don't have that confidence in that moment, how are you gonna ever push further?
Yeah. And then like there are people that were there like at the course who then like I like kept up with me like, so you're signing up for your advanced exam? They're like, no, I think I'm gonna wait a year.
Yeah.
And maybe they didn't take it that year and took it the next year, but I feel like a lot of people are kind of just like, oh, they decided it wasn't for them.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's like when you go to those kind of things, like my wife went to law school, and apparently there's this term called being a gunner. And like that's like the people that are like gunning for the top spot.
Oh, yeah,
and like and I was never that in traditional schooling, but I'm a little bit like that in wine.
Sure. Yeah.
And so you seek out the other people that are kind of like tryhards,
pushing.
for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
And like it's fun. You find your people. It's like, oh, this is fun. Like we're gonna we're gonna spend way too much time reading about grape juice, and like we're gonna get really good at this.
We're masochists together.
Exactly. And it's like it's just like the community and the camaraderie, and it's like, so it's like on one hand, like what you were saying, like it is changed a lot, and like the bottlenecking and everything is like it makes it seem a little bit more like artificially difficult to go through the process. But on the other hand, it adds more stages to being like, hey, this takes a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of effort. Are you sure you want to do this?
Yeah.
And like, I think it kind of gives that opportunity for like the people like me who want to go all the way, who are like to like kind of seek out the other people that are, I guess, masochists is a good way of putting it. Yeah. And like who want to go through all the pain and suffering and like, time and money and everything. It's like, okay, let's do this together.
Yeah.
So I don't mind that there's so many steps. I feel like it is kind of necessary just because advanced is such a big jump.
Well, I think it's cool. I mean, when I saw that class and I saw everybody that was there this year, I was just so like, I was like, oh, I know, 8 or 9 of these people. And I was like, it's just so cool to see you guys all get together. And, that's kind of the whole point of the podcast, is to kind of create a little bit more community, and where we need a community, I think. Since the pandemic, roles have been consolidated a lot. People don't have as much time to be as community focused. And if you're not forming a tasting group, or you're not in a tasting group, like you don't really have a lot of community. And so I really like to see this class. This is the first time I ever realized it, I guess, but I like to see the class because I was like, oh, all these people are going to connect now, and all the San Francisco kids are going to meet each other. And it's just like, that just builds a stronger network. It builds a stronger community. And I think that's so important, especially with, as lofty a goal as Master Somm is, right? You need that community. You need to kind of like submerge yourself into that information and that knowledge, right?
It's a intense pursuit,
certainly, to say the least. And so you're swinging for that. And what are the next steps for you? What does that kind of time frame look like? Because for listeners that maybe don't know, the MS is 3 different tests.
Mm-hmm.
Theory, service, tasting, and you have to pass. They're not all at once, but you have to pass all of them within 3 attempts.
Yeah.
And then if you don't, you have to start from the ground up.
Exactly.
Which is
so
disheartening, but
so I took it for the first time last year or this year.
Okay.
And you have to take theory first.
Okay.
And so I did not pass theory this year.
I see.
You need a 75% score to pass. And I scored far enough below that I'm still eligible to take it again next year, but like not close enough that I felt really good about it.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's like, I think I'm going to take a year off.
Okay.
Because, I just got married, and I'm a little bit more burned out than I thought I would be.
Sure.
From like working so much and studying so hard and like not getting close enough that I'm like, oh man, like, okay. When I like, that phrase, it's like, if you like shoot at the king you best not miss.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and it's
Yeah.
like I feel like I missed a little bit on this
yeah.
time, and I'm like, man, okay, like I really need to dig my heels in, and
Yeah.
like I need to take this more seriously.
Yeah. Yeah.
I need to study more. I need to wake up earlier.
Mm-hmm.
I need to not fuck around so much.
Yeah,
Like, you
yeah.
know, it's like
Yeah.
this takes, whether it be like you're getting off of work at 11 p.m. and studying when you get home,
Mm-hmm.
or you're waking up at 5, 6 a.m. and like studying. And does that mean it's like, and all the sacrifices you make along with that, it's like, do I keep going to the gym because exercise is better for memory retention?
Right.
Or is it like not worth
Do I
the
really
like
not have the
dozens
hours?
of hours
Yeah,
that'll
yeah,
add
yeah.
up, you know? You know, and so it's like, and like how much is it worth it to get 6 hours of sleep instead of 8 hours of sleep every night if it means 2 hours extra of studying? I don't know. Like if you're actually using those 2 hours
Right.
to study for
Efficiently.
2 hours,
Yeah.
maybe it is. But if you're not,
Yeah.
then it's like, no, it's not, you know? So
Yeah.
it's like, it's hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like honestly, like this sounds like I don't like the way this sounds because so many people struggle with it, but I thought advanced was easy.
Yeah.
And like not easy in the sense of like actually being easy, but like I did it.
Yeah.
And like I did it on my first try,
Yep.
and like I was like, okay, I scored pretty well.
Yeah.
And MS is like really hard.
Right. Yeah.
And like I you know, I expected that jump in difficulty,
Right.
but it's like, oh, like this actually is as hard as everyone says it is.
Well, but to think too that like you have to get a 75 or above to pass, and you passed your advance, and then you weren't able to score a 75, is just like, it shows you the significance and difference of difficulty, right?
Yeah.
Because if you passed your advance and you got 75 and you like barely passed, maybe be a little bit more kind of like hesitant to take your theory for your MS versus like, you know, just crushing your advanced theory wise and then rolling into your master thinking like, I got this in the fucking bag, you know?
And like I didn't think I had it in the bag,
right?
But I was kind of like, well, my work will pay for it.
Yeah,
you know, one of the other like benefits of working for Bacchus.
Yep.
And it's kind of just like a free shot.
Yeah,
you know, my first attempt.
That's great.
And I was like, you know, I'm like 24. I'm like, I'm getting married this year, but like I have good momentum coming off of advanced, and like I don't want to lose that momentum for nothing.
Yep.
I don't have to pay that much money to take this exam, considering like the exam cost is covered and flight and everything, and hotel. It's like it's almost covered all the way.
That's so
you know,
great.
it's like not, it's still definitely a little bit out of pocket, but like it's not as bad as it could be.
Right.
And like it was just like, I don't think the exam was unfair. Like I remember me and my good friend Madison Pettit, like we got breakfast the day after the exam.
Who's now at TIA?
Oh really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Breaking news.
And we were like, we were chatting over breakfast, and we were both like, you know what? That exam was passable. Like it was not that hard. And like, you know, like funnily enough, like looking back after it, like she scored like 20 percentage points better than I did. Like she did much better than I did, you know. But we were both like, yeah, that wasn't that hard.
That's so funny.
You know, because we were going over some of the questions, and like I don't think I realized how many I like answered incorrectly in the moment.
Right.
But like when we were going back over them afterwards, I was like, oh yeah, that's the answer to that. And like not realizing that like I had answered something else entirely.
Yeah.
But I was like, yeah, that's the answer. Like, you know, it's like, okay, that's the answer to that. That's the answer to that. That's not an impossible question. Yeah, that is an impossible question. But, you know, if 3 out of 4 are, if only 1 out of 4 are impossible, then it's a passable exam.
Right. Yeah.
And so like, you know, she got very close to passing, and I'm sure that she will pass eventually. But like, it's that kind of exam where it's like, it's totally fair, it's just like you need to sink a lot of time into
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
And I don't know, like that going into like this coming year, I don't know if I want to sink that much time
Sure.
into it
Yeah.
because 2026, if I'm taking that exam again, it's like I'm going to be full throttle that
Yeah.
exam.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
if I don't pass in 26, that means I'm taking in 27 and 28, you know,
Yep.
it's like
Yep.
if I take a year off this year, I can kind of reset
Right.
and then like go into it with the mentality of like taking it again till I pass.
Guns blazing.
James Tran. Right. Whereas like
Shout out to James.
if I take it this year and I don't pass again, then it's kind of like, oh, there is kind of like if I don't score high enough in my third attempt, I
Right.
have to take a year off.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
You know, and it's kind of just like, you know what? I got more burned out than I thought I would with all of the life stuff that came up.
Mhm.
And I no longer have a job where I can just like get the night off
Yeah.
really easily.
Yep.
And like I'm working longer hours. And I think like it just makes sense to reset.
Yeah.
And like I'll get, 2026 through 2028, like I can get 3 good attempts in.
Yeah.
Hopefully I pass on my first try.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's like you have to give all or nothing
Mhm.
like on these exams.
Yeah, yeah.
Like certified you can go one toe in, and advanced you can go one foot in, but like MS is like you need to be all in. You need to jump in the pool.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think that how long did it take you to really find kind of like your studying ritual, or do you still try a bunch of different shit all the time? Are you like consuming through podcasts and consuming through audiobooks and videos and streaming on Som TV, or like are you like strictly a book guy?
I'm a multimedia learner.
Mm-hmm.
I think that multiple passes through the same material is the most efficient way to kind of sear information into your brain. And so like for me, I found that like while studying for advanced, the best form of studying for me was to read something and listen to something.
Mm-hmm.
So like I would go through like the Guild Psalm study guides or like the Jancis Robinson World Atlas of Wine, and I would read through it, and oh yeah, there you go. And I would read through it, and then I would have my phone read it to me.
Right.
So I would, and what that does is it's like you have the visual like cataloging of information. And then so then when you listen to it afterwards, it's like when you hear a word, your brain automatically prompts you what the next word is going to be because you've read it already.
Mm.
And so it's like, it's almost like it's a much more efficient way of learning.
Sure.
Because it's like, it's much easier to remember something that your brain is already like prompting you to remember. It's like, oh yeah, that is what they're going to say next. And then that's just like, it's so much easier to remember. It's crazy actually how much that helps. Wow. So it's like, if you can go into like accessibility features on your phone, and you can have your phone read you things.
Yeah.
And you can do that versus just like what's on the screen versus an audiobook. And like, so that was one of the biggest things for me, is like, I would read everything, and then like my commute to work, walking my dog, like put in my AirPods and just have my phone read it to me. And like I'm a big like, I can do audio, but I'm a big visual learner.
Yeah. So
it's like I would read through something, have my phone read it to me, look at a map, see where the different like, AOPs are that they're talking about, and then like just kind of like sear that into my brain. I know some people use like a mind palace or like memory palace sort of deal, where it's like they'll envision their childhood home,
right?
And it's like each room of the house is like a different region of the world for wine. Jesus. And I personally, that doesn't work for me, but I know it does work for some people. And but I think like context is everything.
Right.
Like, I don't think you can learn anything without context.
Mhm.
So it's like, it doesn't, like, if you're reading about like I don't know, the satellite regions of Saint-Emilion, like right bank Bordeaux, there's like 4 or whatever. And it's like, it doesn't do me any good to just like read them
Right.
on a page. But
Yeah.
if I look at a map
Yeah.
and I like see them, like placed on a map, I'm like, then I can read them in a little bit later, and like it immediately conjures the map in my mind.
Right.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, that's Saint Fiscan, that's Montagne, okay, that's Lucin. It's like,
Mhm.
okay, like it's like words don't mean anything without a visual context.
Right. Yeah.
And I think like that's for me, that's the only way to learn.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
the only way to do it.
I'm with you too. Like when I studied for the only thing that I studied for seriously and failed was the Italian wine professional. I was like making blank copies of the Italian map and just
Mhm.
like drawing in the borders of the
Mhm.
regions and stuff like that. And like that was so much more helpful for me than like reading them like, oh, from north to south or whatever. I was like, that doesn't mean anything
doesn't
to
mean
me.
anything.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
I was like, how does that help me? They're like, to the southwest. I'm like, is that on the right or is that on the left?
Right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
No, totally.
That's
It's
awesome.
it's like you need, like we've all like when I'm tableside, and I'm like talking about this Garganega from Suave or whatever it is, it's like if I say like, oh, this is from northeastern Italy,
Yeah,
like that brief pause is me looking at Italy
in the
and
map.
being like,
Yeah.
okay, well, the Veneto and Friuli and everything is like, okay, that's eastern. That's
Yeah.
right there. And
Yeah.
if you zoom in, there's Lake Garda and there's Valpolicella and there's Suave, and it's like, okay, and those are those wines right there. And like, and then everything, and then once you conjure the map and once you zoom in on the map and you kind of start to place the pieces like around the map, like the important geographical features, like in this case, like Lake Garda and like northwestern Italy and the Dolomites are up there, and then it's like, what are the grapes? And then it's like, yeah, I kind of find that it's like once you start to fill in the context, the natural progression is like, what is to ask yourself, what is the rest of the context? And that question of like, what is the rest of the context, I find lines up very well with like the tableside information that you would want to tell guests.
That's great. Yeah.
So it's like, what are the grapes? How is it made? What does it taste like? What are the main geographical features that, affect this wine? Like, what are the traditional winemaking styles? And like, and why do they do this? And, it's like, there's a why for everything.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's like, and that impacts the reason that this wine is crisp and light and bright and will go well with your halibut and like,
Right.
all of these things. And you don't have to tell guests every single thing, but it's like I just find it very fun to learn.
Yeah.
And like, when you start to conjure this map, it's kind of like the natural next step is like, well, what is everything else that goes into this map? And if I don't know something, then I want to look it up.
Yeah.
And then eventually, after years and years and years and lots of time and a little bit of sleep, eventually it fills in.
Yeah.
And I feel confident talking to guests about this wine. And
more trips.
And more wine trips and more wine trips, exactly.
That helps.
It does help.
Yeah, I remember sitting on the hill in Serra-Lunga and going like, oh, this is what Barolo looks like, like never even looking at a map doesn't do anything compared to being in the vineyard. And then when you're in the vineyard, you can also think about like, okay, if I'm here on the map, then where's everything else? Yeah.
There's nothing like it.
Nothing like it.
To add on to your specific example, I remember being in Barolo and being on the hill of Canubi at the the Bourgogne winery. And I remember looking, standing on the hill and at the winery, the Serrano from Batista Bourgogne. And I remember looking what would have been northwest-ish and being like, oh, is that Trequio? And they were like, yeah, that's Trequio.
Yeah.
And I was like, so then that's Brunate.
Yeah.
And they were like, and yep, that's Brunate. And I'm like, so that's Lamora up there. And they're like, yeah, wow, you like maps, don't you?
You're like, well, it's helpful when I think about it in this context.
Exactly. Yeah. And I was like, and like
looking at it from above and looking at it horizontally are quite different.
I'm like, and this is every day for you. Like, I've only ever seen it on a map, like
that's a good point.
So
like, can you tell me the neighborhoods in San Francisco? Bet you can't.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, like being somewhere and like you have like the bird's eye view visual to add like context to your knowledge, but then like being like the first person view too, like it's huge.
Incredible difference.
It's huge. Yeah. Absolutely.
Unless you're totally hammered, then it doesn't.
It's hard to remember everything when you're totally hammered. Although that being said, I remember some good moments from the Jorge Ordonez
trip
that we went on.
Yeah, there was great moments.
And
a lot of hammered moments, a lot of good moments. What is good? Thank you, Victor. Thank you, Jorge.
Thank you, Victor.
We appreciate you. Cool. Well, we'll get to the section now where we talk about this wine. What do you think about the wine? You like it?
It's delicious.
That's the most important part. Yeah, please. You can actually reveal it unless you want to try to swing a guess.
I have an idea.
Okay. It's, again, as mentioned, it's not always blindable, and it's it's not always blindable. That's the best I'll say.
All right. So it's a red wine.
It's a red wine.
There is just a little bit of age indication or oxidation. It's got like a slight kind of brown-ish tint on the rim. The whole thing generally is translucent, but it still has a pretty dark core to it. So like, I don't know. I'm not thinking like Syrah or Malbec. Like, it's not purple.
Sure.
It's red.
Right.
It's red.
Yep.
When I smell it, it's got this like beautiful like Coca-Cola, menthol, Play-Doh, baked clay.
Yeah.
Like kind of nose to it, which is just like, for me, that's only a couple things. It's like aged Napa Cab, it's Rioja, and then after that, it's like, okay, this could be like really interesting, cool climate Syrah. Like I think a lot of Australian Syrahs that aren't like the Barossa fruit rum smell like this. I think a lot of old Bordeaux varieties smell like this, but Bordeaux tends to be a little bit more floral, and this kind of has that like earth, terracotta, Play-Doh kind of thing. Like, that is more Napa Cab to me. But it smells like Rioja. I feel a little bit like, I'm like, oh, am I gaming it too much because we went to Rioja together? But this smells like Rioja to me. And I would not be surprised if this is 20-year-old Napa Cab, but it also tastes kind of like 15-year-old Tempranillo from Rioja. So that's what I'm going with.
Okay.
It's got bright acidity. It's dark and red fruited. It's incredibly savory. It seems a little oaky. It's delicious. Whatever it is, I like this wine.
It's a little oaky, but it's integrated well, and it's incredibly off grid. So you swung well, but it's domestic Barbera.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. So it's Shenandoah Valley, California, Cooper Ranch. It's like 3,000 feet above sea level.
But it is.
And it's a 13.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's 11 years old.
Yep. Yeah.
Got some age on it.
The age is showing, but it's still really well integrated. And all of the aromatics that you were calling, I was like, yes, yes, yes. But to me, it's also like, it's hard to picture Barbera outside of
Mhm.
Piemonte, right? So like when you're thinking about it, it's like really tough to kind of pigeonhole it and then more specifically into this. But I thought like, what do I show Jordan? What do I show Jordan? And I wanted to show you something that I was like, I bet he's never had something like this.
I've never had 11-year-old Shenandoah Valley Barbera.
Exactly. That was the point. It was about sharing something kind of like fun and interesting that was like, and I was also like, should I show him something Spanish because we went to Spain together? Like, and I was like, is that not fair?
Right. It's like too obvious.
And I was also
know.
like, I don't want to show him something that we had. I'd rather show him something that like we didn't have, but I don't know. Like,
I will say, I smelled this and I was like, oh, this is either Old California or Rioja.
yeah, yeah.
Like, I was like, there's not just like this smell. Like, there's, or maybe like some weird Rhone stuff, you know, but like, there's not much this could be.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like, I guess maybe Old California just kind of has a smell to it because I was like, oh, this could be Old Napa Cab, you know? But it's Old Shenandoah Barbera, which is so much cooler
Just
and weirder.
fucking
But,
weird.
like,
yeah.
I think like the fruit characteristic of like red wine from California, when it's made in a way that retains acidity to age well, it's like it just has this medicinal like root beer, you know, Coca-Cola sassafras.
Yeah,
like
the Play-Doh call
red
was so
fruited,
cool. I was like, yeah, for sure.
It
Yeah.
smells like Play-Doh.
Yeah.
I love that's one of my favorite.
Or kind of
notes to
silly
pick.
putty or something.
Yes,
yeah.
absolutely.
That's funny.
And if you go and taste like a bunch of these like early 90s like Napa Valley Cabernets, like that's what they taste like.
Yeah. Yeah.
They have like any, you know, 97 is kind of the turning point for Napa Cab. But like if you taste like anywhere from like, you know, I don't know, 78 to 96, like they're all this like low alcohol, high acidity, red fruited, savory.
Yeah.
You know, and they're absolutely delicious. And they taste a lot like this. And, you know, and it's obviously like the high quality wines are going to show their age in a little bit of a slower fashion.
Sure.
Whereas like I thought maybe we were drinking something like, whew, like really good from the 90s, and it's like, okay, it's 2013.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like Barbera is something
still pretty
like,
lively.
Right,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that it like still has so much acidity.
Yeah.
And everything. But like, yeah, this is great, dude.
It's a fun
this
wine.
This is a really good wine.
Yeah. This is part of Bianca's bag today too. It was all part of that same producer, Easton Terre Rouge. It's all intentionally aged stuff that's, you know, held back forever, mostly single vineyard things that are like, they're making Roussan bottlings, they're making Viognier bottlings, they're making Marsanne bottlings. There's Barbera. They have, you know, old Zins, old Côte d'Aron style wines. Yeah, it's a trip indeed. Well, anything else? Is there anything else we should cover?
I think we covered most of it. But if you wanted, I remember beforehand that you said if there's anything I wanted to impart.
Yep. That this is the phase.
This is the phase.
Yes.
So
I'll pour you more wine while you speak, and then we can cheers when you're done.
The only thing I will say is that like I guess this goes back to my answer to your question about like interviewing. And I think it's important to remember with like anyone that's like taking these kind of certifications and exams and everything is that like the result of the result of the exam does not define you as a person. Like I am not taking this exam as a way to fulfill my existence, as a way to justify my life. In the same way that I am not living to work as a sommelier at Spruce, and you're not living to work as a sales rep for Chambers and Chambers.
Yep.
I love my job.
That's why.
and it's a great job, and I'm so happy to have it, and I'm blessed to have the opportunity, but it's like I don't live to work.
Right.
You know, I work to live.
Yeah.
It's just a job at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And this is just a certification.
Yeah.
And like I have placed a certain personal value on achieving this certification because, you know, whether it be that only like 280 whatever people have achieved it and I want to be one of those people, or that it'll help me advance my career, or like I'll have, you know, higher like earning opportunities, or like it'll help me land a job with better hours that I want, like any of that would be valid, but it's like, you know, I want to do it because it sounds fun.
Yeah.
Like it sounds like a challenge.
Yeah.
And it's like I am such a proponent of like living life just to live life and enjoy it. Like we have to be here, right, on this earth. And we are the only ones. We have to bear the responsibilities and the brunt of every single day, so on the flip side of that, we deserve to revel in the successes of the life that we're living as well. And like if that means that like I set myself on a harder path to then maybe, you know, bask in the glory of achieving something like that I have set out for myself, like I think that's worth it. In the same way that like, you know, I often tell guests at my restaurant, you know, like I'm not in the business of turning down generous offers. You know, it's like someone offers me something, like I will take it because we're all just living life out here, and like it can be hard, and so we should take the reprieves whenever we get it.
I love that.
So I see some people in my field that make their entire life passing an examination.
Yep.
And I see very few people that have passed this examination that are the ones who don't have a life outside of it.
Right.
It's about balance. It's about happiness. Like, do what makes you happy. You have to live your life, so you might as well enjoy it. This is a secondary thing. You know, this is something to add value to your life, not to detract value from your life.
That's very important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is not the end all be all. It's just something we're doing to have fun.
Hopefully.
And wine is fun.
Wine is fun. Cheers. Thank you.
You're welcome.